March 18, 1945. Lechfeld Air Base, Bavaria, Germany. Oberstleutnant Heinrich Baer leafed through the intelligence report with barely concealed contempt. His fingers, stained with oil from his morning pre-flight inspection, left smudges on the pale blue paper. "Look at this," Baer said, tossing the document onto the wooden desk where it landed with a dismissive slap. "The Americans think they can catch our Schwalbes on the ground." Major Gunther Lutzow nodded, his laugh sharp and bitter. "They send their propeller planes against jets. It is like sending cavalry against panzers." Hauptmann Franz Stigler, the unit's intelligence officer, leaned forward with measured concern. "The reports indicate they are studying our takeoff patterns. Perhaps we should vary our—" But Baer waved him off with an impatient gesture. "France, we are flying aircraft that cruise at 870 kilometers per hour. Their Mustangs achieve 700 at maximum speed. Once airborne, we are untouchable. The mathematics are simple." At Achmer, German jets had destroyed 12 American bombers for 1 loss. At Rhein, the ratio was 15-1. Over Berlin, 18 American aircraft fell to jets in a single engagement. The mathematics were undeniable. Technological superiority translated to battlefield dominance. What Baer didn't know, what none of them could have known as they reviewed intelligence in that cramped operations room, was that American tactical innovation would destroy the Luftwaffe's jet advantage within 6 weeks. The numbers would become catastrophic. 43 Me-262s destroyed on the ground or during takeoff for every one lost in air-to-air combat. American fighter groups would destroy 237 Me-262s between March and May 1945. German jet losses would exceed 60% of operational aircraft. The confident laughter in that Bavarian briefing room would become history's most expensive miscalculation, measured in 237 irreplaceable aircraft and 189 irreplaceable pilots. Baer had earned his confidence through combat. Over Leningrad, he shot down 7 Soviet fighters in 4 days. At Kursk, his unit achieved a 23-1 kill ratio. During the defense of the Reich, Baer personally destroyed 16 American bombers in 3 months. His combat record showed 220 confirmed victories across all fronts. He had flown the Messerschmitt Bf 109 through Poland, France, and Russia. He had flown the Focke-Wulf 190 during the darkest days of 1943. Now he flew the Me-262, an aircraft that represented German engineering superiority made manifest. The jet engines produced 1,980 pounds of thrust each. The aircraft carried 4 30 Mk 108 cannons, each firing 650 rounds per minute. Maximum speed reached 870 kilometers per hour. Service ceiling extended to 37,565 feet. Range covered 652 miles with drop tanks. These were not projections or propaganda. These were measured performance characteristics. American bomber crews feared the Me-262. At Schweinfurt in February 1945, jets destroyed 9 B-17s in 14 minutes. At Magdeburg, 12 bombers fell in 18 minutes. The P-51 Mustang, America's premier escort fighter, could not catch a jet in level flight. The P-47 Thunderbolt proved equally helpless. American fighter pilots reported engaging Me-262s that simply accelerated away from combat when threatened. Colonel Hubert Zemke, commander of the 479th Fighter Group, stated in his after-action report dated February 28, 1945, "The jet aircraft represents a fundamental shift in air combat capability. Our current tactics prove inadequate." General Karl Spaatz, commanding the United States Strategic Air Forces in Europe, wrote to Washington on March 2, 1945, "Enemy jet aircraft now constitute our primary tactical concern. We are losing bombers at unsustainable rates." Hauptmann Franz Stigler studied intelligence reports that others dismissed. His background in mathematics made him attentive to patterns. He noted that Me-262 losses occurred disproportionately during takeoff and landing phases. Between January 15 and March 15, 1945, German jets destroyed 47 American aircraft in air combat while losing 6 jets to enemy fighters. However, during the same period, 19 Me-262s were destroyed during takeoff or landing by strafing attacks. Stigler compiled these statistics into a memorandum dated March 12, 1945. He presented the data to Baer, who read the first paragraph before setting it aside. "France, you worry too much. We lose some aircraft during vulnerable phases. This is unavoidable. Once airborne, we are supreme." The mathematics seemed irrefutable. Unteroffizier Werner Zell had flown the Me-262 for 3 weeks. Previously a Bf-109 pilot with 41 victories, he found the jet both exhilarating and concerning. The acceleration proved breathtaking. The firepower devastated targets, but the takeoff required full concentration. The Jumo 4 engines took 8 seconds to spool from idle to full thrust. During this period, the aircraft accelerated slowly, vulnerable to any fighter overhead. Zell mentioned this to his squadron mates, who agreed but considered it an acceptable risk. After all, they flew the world's first operational jet fighter. The Americans flew propeller-driven aircraft from the previous generation. Zell shot down 2 P-51s during his second week flying jets, both during head-on passes where the Mustangs could not maneuver effectively. The kill ratio remained decisively in Germany's favor. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. Willow Run, Michigan, December 1944. Henry Ford II walked through the Willow Run B-24 Liberator plant as production workers assembled bombers with mechanical precision. This single facility produced 18 B-24 bombers daily. Every 63 minutes, another 4-engine bomber rolled off the assembly line. The plant floor stretched over 3.5 million square feet. It employed 42,000 workers operating in 3 shifts. The facility consumed 670,000 kilowatt-hours of electricity daily. It used 1,200 tons of aluminum weekly. It processed 156,000 rivets per aircraft. It installed 450,000 parts per bomber. By December 1944, Willow Run had produced 6,792 B-24 Liberators. Germany's entire heavy bomber production from 1939 to 1945 totaled 6,086 aircraft. This single facility was producing more than Germany's entire heavy bomber industry across 6 years of war. In January 1942, America produced just 1,854 military aircraft monthly. By June 1943, production reached 7,742 aircraft monthly. By December 1944, American factories were producing 9,113 military aircraft monthly. This single month's production exceeded Germany's total aircraft production for all of 1940. American factories produced 96,318 military aircraft in 1944 alone. Germany produced 39,807 aircraft in 1944, its highest annual total. America outproduced Germany by a ratio of 2.4 to 1. This represented not just quantitative superiority, but qualitative transformation. American aircraft plants achieved production rates that German planners considered physically impossible. The P-51 Mustang production line at North American Aviation's Inglewood, California plant produced 15 fighters daily by late 1944. The Dallas, Texas plant produced 12 P-51s daily. Combined monthly production reached 614 Mustangs in November 1944. Each aircraft required 26,000 man-hours to produce. The Packard Motor Company plant in Detroit produced the Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, manufacturing 55 engines daily. This single American facility was producing more Merlin engines than all British factories combined. The mathematics were staggering. America produced more fighters in 1 month than Germany produced in 3 months, despite Germany devoting greater percentages of industrial capacity to aircraft production. Dorothy Miller, previously a seamstress at a Detroit dress manufacturer, now operated a hydraulic press forming P-51 wing sections. Her press stamped out 17 wing components per shift, each requiring precise tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. She produced 4,250 wing sections monthly. Her single workstation's output exceeded the entire monthly wing production of the Messerschmitt Regensburg facility, which managed 3,890 wing sections for all aircraft types monthly. Dorothy earned $1.85 per hour, significantly above her previous wage of 65 cents per hour. She worked 54 hours weekly, including 6 hours of overtime. Her husband served in the Pacific with the Marines. Her 2 sons, ages 16 and 14, worked part-time at a shipyard riveting Liberty ship hulls. The Miller family's combined industrial output exceeded the production of many small European factories. James Washington, from Birmingham, Alabama, operated the machine tools that produced P-51 propeller assemblies at a subcontractor facility in Cleveland, Ohio. His equipment manufactured 27 complete propeller assemblies per day. Each assembly required precisely machined components with tolerances of 0.001 inches. Washington's daily production exceeded the entire weekly propeller production of the Messerschmitt Augsburg facility. He earned $2.10 per hour operating equipment that cost $125,000. His training took 6 weeks. Before the war, he worked as a sharecropper, earning approximately $300 annually. Now he earned $5,460 annually, an increase of 1,820%. His brother operated a milling machine at the same plant. His sister assembled electrical components at a radio factory supplying bomber equipment. The Washington family's collective output represented more industrial capacity than entire German factory complexes. Charles Wilson, $1-a-year man from General Motors, managed logistics for fighter aircraft production across 14 facilities. Previously president of General Motors with an annual salary of $250,000, he now earned $1 annually while coordinating the movement of 16,780 components required for each P-51 Mustang. His organization tracked 2.4 million parts monthly moving through supply chains spanning 43 states. The logistics system he managed moved more material daily than Germany's entire railroad system moved weekly for aircraft production. Wilson coordinated delivery of 840 tons of aluminum daily, 240 tons of steel daily, 1,890 tons of various components daily. This material flow exceeded the total monthly material allocation for Germany's entire fighter aircraft industry. Americans discarded 4,200 pounds of aluminum scrap daily from the North American aviation plant. This scrap, considered below specification for aircraft construction, went to recycling facilities where it became cookware, automobile parts, and other civilian goods. Germany allocated 3,100 pounds of aluminum monthly to the Messerschmitt Regensburg facility for repairs and modifications. American waste exceeded German allocation by 135%. The mathematics were brutal. One American factory's rejected material surpassed an entire German facility's total material supply. American workers threw away more aluminum in one day than German workers received in 1 month. The waste from single-shift production at Willow Run exceeded Germany's total monthly production capacity for heavy bombers. Americans discarded 127,000 rivets weekly that failed quality inspection. These rivets, rejected for minor cosmetic defects but mechanically sound, exceeded the total weekly rivet allocation for the Heinkel-Rostock facility. Workers threw away sandpaper, drill bits, and cutting tools that German workers sharpened and reused until physically destroyed. The cafeteria discarded more food daily than Lechfeld Air Base received monthly. Specifically, the Willow Run cafeteria discarded an average of 840 pounds of food daily. Lechfeld received approximately 18,600 pounds of food monthly for 1,200 personnel. American waste represented 4.5% of German allocation. American factories discarded 67,000 pounds of steel monthly that failed to meet aerospace specifications. This steel, rejected for minor impurities, went to construction companies building warehouses and civilian structures. Germany allocated 48,000 pounds of steel monthly to the Focke-Wulf-Bremen facility for fighter production. American waste exceeded German total allocation by 140%. Workers threw away hydraulic fluid that Germany rationed by the liter. They discarded electrical wire that German facilities spliced and reused. They threw away rubber gaskets that German maintenance crews repaired repeatedly. The waste from testing engines at Packard exceeded the fuel allocation for combat operations at 3 German fighter bases. Specifically, engine testing at Packard consumed 18,400 gallons of fuel weekly. The Luftwaffe bases at Achmer, Rhein, and Lechfeld received combined fuel allocation of 52,000 gallons monthly. American testing alone consumed 35% of their operational allocation. Hauptmann Franz Stigler reviewed American production statistics with growing alarm. His sources in neutral Switzerland provided reliable intelligence from American newspapers and industrial publications. Americans made no secret of their production capacity. They publicized it. In December 1944, the New York Times reported American aircraft production exceeded 9,000 monthly. The Detroit Free Press detailed automotive factory conversion to military production. Life magazine featured photographic essays on bomber assembly lines. These weren't secret intelligence reports. These were public acknowledgments of industrial capacity. Stigler compiled the numbers into a memorandum dated January 23, 1945. American aircraft production in 1944, 96,318. German aircraft production in 1944, 39,807. Single American facility, Willow Run, annual production, 6,570 bombers. Total German heavy bomber production 1939-1945, 6,086 aircraft. Conclusion: America possesses industrial capacity exceeding German capacity by factors we cannot match through efficiency or effort. He presented this memorandum to Oberst Johann Steinhoff, who read it completely before setting it down. France, we are aware of American production. But production means nothing without trained pilots, tactical doctrine, and combat experience. They build many aircraft. We build superior aircraft. One Me-262 equals 10 Mustangs in combat value. Stigler wanted to argue but recognized futility. The mathematics were being ignored. March 19, 1945. Rhein Airfield, Bavaria, Germany. 1347 hours. Unteroffizier Werner Zell was conducting pre-flight inspection on his Me-262 when the attack began. He knelt beside the port landing gear checking tire pressure when he heard the distinctive sound of Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. The sound came from low altitude, growing rapidly louder. Zell looked up to see 4 P-51 Mustangs approaching from the northwest at approximately 200 feet altitude. At 13:47 hours and 12 seconds, he began running toward the concrete revetment 40 meters away. At 13:47 hours and 31 seconds, the first P-51 opened fire. Elapsed time from sighting to engagement, 19 seconds. The lead Mustang's 6.50 caliber machine guns fired approximately 4,800 rounds per minute combined. Tracer rounds walked across the taxiway toward Zell's aircraft. At 13:47 hours and 35 seconds, the first round struck his Me-262. At 13:47 hours and 38 seconds, rounds penetrated the fuel tank. At 13:47 hours and 41 seconds, the aircraft exploded. Elapsed time from engagement to destruction, 10 seconds. Kill time, 10 seconds. Zell reached the revetment and dove behind the concrete wall as fragments from his exploding aircraft scattered across the airfield. The first P-51 pulled up sharply, its pilot executing a climbing turn to the right. Second P-51 engaged another Me-262 parked near the operations building. At 13:47 hours and 44 seconds, the Mustang opened fire. At 13:47 hours and 49 seconds, the target aircraft's engines caught fire. At 13:47 hours and 52 seconds, the fire reached the ammunition bay. The 30mm cannon shells began cooking off, their explosions tearing through the aircraft's fuselage. Kill time, 8 seconds. The third Mustang targeted a Me-262 beginning its takeoff roll. The German jet had just released brakes and started accelerating down the runway. At 13:47 hours and 56 seconds, the P-51 opened fire from 600 yards range. At 13:48 hours and 3 seconds, rounds struck the Me-262's port engine. At 13:48 hours and 7 seconds, the engine exploded. The German jet veered off the runway, its pilot attempting to control the aircraft with single-engine thrust. At 13:48 hours and 14 seconds, the aircraft crashed into a maintenance building. Kill time, 18 seconds. The fourth Mustang engaged a Me-262 attempting emergency takeoff from a taxiway. The German pilot applied full throttle, his engines spooling up as the Mustang approached. At 13:48 hours and 19 seconds, the P-51 opened fire. The Me-262's engines reached full thrust at 13:48 hours and 22 seconds, but the aircraft had not yet achieved flying speed. At 13:48 hours and 27 seconds, rounds struck the cockpit. The German pilot slumped forward. The Me-262 continued accelerating unmanned until it struck a fuel truck at 13:48 hours and 35 seconds. The resulting explosion destroyed both vehicles and killed 3 ground crew personnel. Kill time, 16 seconds. Total engagement duration, 1 minute 23 seconds. Enemy losses, 4 Me-262 aircraft destroyed, 2 pilots killed, 1 pilot injured, 3 ground crew killed. American losses, 0 aircraft, 0 personnel. Kill ratio, 4:0. The ammunition expended in this 83-second engagement exceeded Rhein Airfield's monthly allocation for all defensive positions. The four P-51s collectively fired approximately 6,720 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition. Rhein Airfield's defensive positions, consisting of 12 20-man anti-aircraft guns and 6 machine gun positions, received monthly allocation of 4,800 rounds total. The Mustangs expended 140% of the base's entire monthly defensive ammunition allocation in less than 90 seconds. Zell emerged from the revetment as the Mustangs departed to the southeast. 4 columns of black smoke rose from burning Me-262s. The stench of burning fuel and rubber filled the air. He walked toward the nearest destroyed aircraft, his own, now a twisted mass of aluminum and steel. The wing section lay 30 meters from the fuselage. The engines, torn from their mounts, rested in separate impact craters. He had flown this specific aircraft for 12 days. Now it represented 840,000 Reichsmarks of irreplaceable equipment reduced to scrap metal. He counted the impact craters in the taxiway, 47 separate strikes within a 20-meter radius. The Mustangs had achieved approximately 70% accuracy on a moving target from 600 yards range, while themselves traveling at 350 miles per hour. The mathematics were changing. Intelligence dismissed initial reports as isolated incidents. Oberstleutnant Baer read the after-action report from Rhein with skepticism. They caught some aircraft on the ground. This happens in war. We have done the same to Allied airfields dozens of times. He cited previous German strafing attacks. At Hesepe, German fighters destroyed 16 RAF Typhoons on the ground. At Melsbroek, 12 Spitfires burned after a successful strafing run. At Eindhoven, 24 American P-47s were destroyed while parked. The Americans are simply reciprocating our tactics. This does not represent a strategic shift. He filed the report without distributing it beyond immediate command. The mathematics, he believed, remained in Germany's favor. Hauptmann Franz Stigler reported to Luftwaffe High Command on March 21, 1945. His intelligence summary detailed 17 separate attacks on German airfields between March 15 and March 20. American fighters destroyed 41 aircraft on the ground, 33 of them Me-262s. German jets destroyed 6 American aircraft during the same period. The kill ratio had inverted from 15, 1 in Germany's favor to 5, 1 in America's favor. Stigler's report included tactical analysis. American fighters are identifying airfields through visual reconnaissance. They approach at low altitude to avoid radar detection. They target aircraft during takeoff and landing phases when jets cannot maneuver. They strike during periods of maximum traffic when multiple aircraft are vulnerable. Recommendation: immediate revision of takeoff procedures, increased fighter cover during vulnerable periods, dispersal of aircraft to reduce target concentration. The report reached Oberst Steinhoff's desk on March 23. He read it thoroughly, marked several passages, and forwarded it to higher command with endorsement. It disappeared into the bureaucracy without generating tactical changes. American production exceeded German capacity by ratios that simplified tactical comparison. In February 1945, American factories produced 7,821 military aircraft. German factories produced 2,837 aircraft. A single American factory, Willow Run, produced 487 B-24 bombers. Germany's entire heavy bomber production in February 1945 totaled 0 aircraft. The Heinkel He-177 production line had shut down in September 1944. No German heavy bombers were being manufactured. American production of P-51 Mustangs in February 1945, 614 aircraft. German production of Me-262 jets in February 1945, 284 aircraft. American production of 4-engine bombers in February 1945, 1,637 aircraft. German production of multi-engine bombers in February 1945, 0 aircraft. The mathematics were becoming clear even to those who preferred denial. German command tried revised tactics. They increased takeoff frequency to reduce aircraft concentration on airfields. The Americans adapted by maintaining continuous patrols over known jet bases. Germans attempted decoy aircraft, parking damaged jets prominently while hiding operational aircraft in camouflaged revetments. American pilots learned to identify occupied revetments by fresh tire tracks and dispersed ground crew. Germans implemented irregular takeoff schedules, launching aircraft at unpredictable intervals. The Americans expanded patrol coverage to maintain station for extended periods, their numerical superiority allowing continuous coverage. Germans ordered dawn and dusk takeoffs to exploit low visibility conditions. American fighters waited for engine start, then attacked during the 8-second engine spool period when jets were committed to takeoff, but not yet airborne. March 27, 1945. Lechfeld Air Base, Bavaria, Germany, 15:23 hours. 12 Me-262s prepared for combat patrol. Oberstleutnant Baer led the formation from the operations building toward their aircraft. The weather was clear, visibility unlimited, temperature 7 degrees Celsius, perfect flying conditions. Intelligence reported a large American bomber formation approaching from the northwest. The Me-262s would intercept, engage, and return before American fighters could respond. Standard procedure. Effective procedure. Proven procedure. At 15:23 hours, the first pilot started engines. The distinctive whine of Jumo 4 turbojets echoed across the airfield. 8 seconds later, the engines reached full power. The pilot released brakes at 15:23 hours and 14 seconds, beginning the takeoff roll. At 15:23 hours and 19 seconds, 16 P-51 Mustangs appeared from the south at 150 feet altitude. They came in 4 flights of 4 aircraft each, approaching from different quadrants simultaneously. The attack plan showed coordination and rehearsal. Flight A targeted aircraft on takeoff. Flight B engaged aircraft taxiing to the runway. Flight C struck aircraft in revetments. Flight D maintained cover against any Me-262s that achieved altitude. At 15:23 hours and 23 seconds, the first Mustang opened fire. The Me-262 on takeoff roll reached 180 kilometers per hour when rounds struck its port wing. At 15:23 hours and 27 seconds, the wing section separated from the fuselage. The aircraft cartwheel across the runway, disintegrating as it tumbled. Elapsed time from engagement to destruction, 4 seconds. Kill time, 4 seconds. At 15:23 hours and 31 seconds, a second Me-262 began takeoff roll. At 15:23 hours and 38 seconds, a Mustang engaged from 400 yards. At 15:23 hours and 44 seconds, rounds penetrated the cockpit. The pilot died instantly. The aircraft continued rolling unmanned until it struck runway lights at 15:23 hours and 51 seconds. Kill time, 13 seconds. A third Me-262 attempted to taxi away from the runway toward concealment. At 15:24 hours and 2 seconds, a P-51 engaged. At 15:24 hours and 9 seconds, rounds struck both engines. The engines exploded sequentially, port first, then starboard. The pilot evacuated the aircraft, running toward the nearest building as his aircraft burned. Kill time, 7 seconds. A fourth Me-262, piloted by Lieutenant Karl Schnurre, achieved flying speed and lifted off at 15:24 hours and 18 seconds. He retracted landing gear and began climbing. At 15:24 hours and 24 seconds, 2 P-51s engaged from his 6 o'clock position. Schnurre attempted to accelerate away, but his engines had not reached optimal thrust. At 15:24 hours and 31 seconds, rounds struck his port engine. At 15:24 hours and 36 seconds, the engine failed. Schnurre attempted single-engine flight but lost control at low altitude. At 15:24 hours and 44 seconds, his aircraft impacted the ground 2 kilometers from the airfield. Kill time, 20 seconds. Oberstleutnant Heinrich Baer reached his aircraft and began emergency start procedures. He knew the situation was catastrophic, but believed one Me-262 in the air could disrupt the American attack. His engines started at 15:24 hours and 51 seconds. He reached full power at 15:24 hours and 59 seconds. He released brakes at 15:25 hours and 3 seconds. At 15:25 hours and 7 seconds, he achieved 120 kilometers per hour. At 15:25 hours and 12 seconds, 3 P-51s engaged simultaneously from multiple angles. Their combined firepower of 18.50 caliber machine guns delivered 14,400 rounds per minute into the target zone. At 15:25 hours and 16 seconds, rounds struck Baer's cockpit canopy. At 15:25 hours and 18 seconds, rounds penetrated the fuel tanks. At 15:25 hours and 21 seconds, the aircraft exploded. Oberstleutnant Heinrich Baer, 220 confirmed victories, recipient of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, died instantly. His aircraft, valued at 840,000 Reichsmarks, disintegrated into fragments scattered across 60 meters of runway. Elapsed time from engagement to death, 9 seconds. Kill time, 9 seconds. The pilot who shot him down was First Lieutenant James Kenny from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Kenny had been flying combat missions for 6 months. This was his 4th confirmed victory. Additional Me-262s were destroyed in revetments and parking areas. At 15:25 hours and 29 seconds, a Mustang engaged in Me-262 concealed in a camouflaged revetment. At 15:25 hours and 34 seconds, incendiary rounds ignited fuel tanks. At 15:25 hours and 41 seconds, the aircraft exploded. Kill time, 12 seconds. At 15:25 hours and 47 seconds, another Mustang strafed 2 Me-262s parked beside a maintenance hangar. At 15:25 hours and 53 seconds, both aircraft caught fire. At 15:26 hours and 2 seconds, ammunition began cooking off. The explosions damaged the hangar and destroyed tools and equipment inside. Kill time for both aircraft, 15 seconds combined. 2 Me-262s managed to take off during the chaos. Hauptmann Franz Stigler, the intelligence officer who also maintained flight status, lifted off at 15:25 hours and 51 seconds during a brief gap in the attack. He climbed at maximum rate, reaching 3,000 meters altitude in 90 seconds. From this position, he watched the remaining engagement unfold below. Unteroffizier Werner Zell lifted off at 15:26 hours and 14 seconds, also escaping during brief American repositioning. Both pilots climbed away from the combat zone, their orders being to preserve aircraft rather than engage when outnumbered severely. Total engagement duration, 4 minutes 8 seconds. Enemy aircraft destroyed, 10 Me-262s. Enemy pilots killed, 7 including Oberstleutnant Heinrich Bär. Enemy pilots wounded, 2. Enemy ground crew killed, 4. American losses, 0 aircraft, 1 pilot wounded slightly by anti-aircraft fire. Kill ratio, 10-0. The ammunition expended exceeded Lechfeld's monthly allocation for combat operations. The 16 P-51s collectively fired approximately 28,800 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition during the 4-minute engagement. Lechfeld's monthly ammunition allocation for defensive positions and air combat training totaled 18,400 rounds. American expenditure exceeded German monthly allocation by 157%. The fuel consumed by 16 P-51s during the engagement, including approach, attack, and departure, totaled approximately 960 gallons. This exceeded Lechfeld's weekly fuel allocation for training flights, which totaled 840 gallons. Unteroffizier Werner Zell watched from 3,000 meters as smoke columns rose from 10 burning aircraft. He counted the P-51s as they formed up after the attack. 16 aircraft, none missing, none trailing smoke indicating damage. They departed in 4-finger formations, relaxed and confident. Below, emergency crews fought fires while ambulances collected casualties. The mathematics were no longer debatable. Germany had lost 10 irreplaceable jet aircraft in 4 minutes. America had lost nothing. The production time to replace 1 Me-262, approximately 3,600 man-hours. Total production time to replace 10 Me-262s, 36,000 man-hours. The production time at current rates, 6 weeks, assuming no disruption to manufacturing. During those 6 weeks, American factories would produce approximately 2,400 P-51 Mustangs. The enemy could lose 16 aircraft daily and replace them the same day. Germany could not replace 10 aircraft in 6 weeks. The mathematics had become asymmetric beyond correction. Hauptmann Franz Stigler landed at an auxiliary field 40 kilometers from Lechfeld. He filed his after-action report with clinical precision. 10 Me-262s destroyed on the ground or during takeoff. 7 pilots killed, 2 wounded, 4 ground crew killed. American losses, 0. Recommendation: immediate cessation of daylight operations from known airfields. Recommendation: dispersal of remaining jets to Audubon strips and improvised fields. Recommendation: acceptance that American tactical adaptation has neutralized our technological advantage. He signed the report and transmitted it through channels. It reached Luftwaffe Command on March 29. By that date, American fighters had destroyed 17 additional Me-262s in separate attacks on 5 different airfields. Americans discarded more ammunition in training exercises than Germany expended in combat operations. At Eglin Field, Florida, gunnery training consumed 240,000 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition weekly. This represented 13,900% of Lechfeld's weekly combat allocation. The discarded brass casings from 1 week of training, if collected and transported to Germany, would provide raw material exceeding Germany's monthly copper allocation for all ammunition production. American pilots fired more training rounds learning to hit targets than German pilots fired in actual combat during their entire careers. The mathematics represented not just quantitative difference but philosophical difference. Americans trained until proficiency became automatic. Germans rationed training to conserve scarce resources. The result showed in combat effectiveness. At Willow Run, workers threw away sandpaper after single-shift use. The discarded sandpaper, still functional but below optimal abrasiveness, went a scrap collection for repurposing into other products. German workers used sandpaper until the abrasive surface was completely smooth, then saved the backing material for other purposes. Americans discarded cutting tools when they dulled slightly. Germans sharpened tools repeatedly until the metal was too thin to hold an edge. Americans threw away shop rags daily. Germans washed and reused shop rags until they disintegrated. The waste from single-shift production at one American facility exceeded the total consumable supplies allocation for Germany's entire aircraft industry. This single facility produced more aircraft than Germany's entire industry, while simultaneously wasting more materials than Germany's entire industry consumed. American workers consumed 4,200 calories daily on average, including factory cafeteria meals. German workers received rations totaling 1,800 calories daily. American workers gained weight during the war. German workers lost weight. Americans complained about food quality while consuming meat, vegetables, bread, butter, and dessert at every meal. Germans considered potato peels a valuable food source. The cafeteria at North American Aviation's Inglewood plant discarded 1,240 pounds of food daily. The Messerschmitt Regensburg facility, with comparable workforce numbers, received 28,000 pounds of food monthly for all personnel. American waste represented 44% of German total allocation. Workers throwing away uneaten portions consumed more calories than German workers received in carefully rationed meals. The aluminum scrap from single-day production at one American aircraft factory exceeded Germany's monthly aluminum allocation for fighter production. Americans collected scrap for recycling, but considered it waste in terms of aircraft production. The scrap had value but not aircraft-grade value. Germans hoarded every gram of aluminum, rationed it precisely, and accounted for every piece. American scrap dealers complained about storage space for excess aluminum. German procurement officers traveled personally to secure aluminum shipments. The mathematical disparity represented incompatible economies at war. One economy operated from abundance. One economy operated from scarcity. Abundance defeated scarcity through overwhelming material advantage. Hauptmann Franz Stigler compiled a comprehensive report on American industrial capacity dated April 3, 1945. He used American newspaper accounts, Swiss intelligence sources, and captured documents. American aircraft production 1944, 96,318 aircraft. German aircraft production 1944, 39,807 aircraft. American advantage, 2-4-1. American aluminum production 1944, 920,000 tons. German aluminum production 1944, 245,000 tons. American advantage 375-1. American steel production 1944, 89.6 million tons. German steel production 1944, 28.5 million tons. American advantage 3-14-1. American oil production 1944, 1.6 billion barrels. German synthetic fuel production 1944, 23 million barrels. American advantage 69-5-1. Conclusion: Germany faces not an enemy but an economic system that produces military equipment as a secondary function of industrial capacity. American automobile production capacity alone exceeds our entire industrial capacity across all sectors. This war was decided by economic factors before it began. The report circulated among senior officers who read it with varying degrees of acceptance. The systematic annihilation continued across April 1945. Between April 1 and April 15, American fighters destroyed 43 Me-262s on the ground or during takeoff. They destroyed another 12 in air combat, though these victories came at cost of 6 P-51s lost. The ratio favored Americans even in air combat, 2-1. The ratio during takeoff attacks remained devastating, 43-0. German jet pilots faced mathematical certainty. Their chances of being shot down during takeoff exceeded their chances of dying in air combat by ratios of 3-5-1. The most dangerous moment in a jet pilot's day was starting engines. The second most dangerous moment was attempting takeoff. Once airborne, they could often escape through superior speed. But reaching that condition required surviving vulnerability that American tactics exploited mercilessly. April 19, 1945. Brandenburg-Brest Airfield, Germany, 8:47 hours. 8 Me-262s faced 14 P-51 Mustangs. The engagement lasted 6 minutes 47 seconds. At 8:47 hours, the first Me-262 attempted takeoff. At 8:47 hours and 31 seconds, a P-51 engaged. At 8:47 hours and 39 seconds, the Me-262 exploded on the runway. Kill time, 8 seconds. At 8:48 hours and 12 seconds, the second Me-262 began takeoff roll. At 8:48 hours and 29 seconds, a P-51 engaged. At 8:48 hours and 36 seconds, rounds struck the cockpit. The pilot slumped. The aircraft crashed. Kill time, 24 seconds. At 8:49 hours and 4 seconds, the third Me-262 attempted takeoff. At 8:49 hours and 18 seconds, 2 P-51s engaged simultaneously. At 8:49 hours and 22 seconds, both engines were hit. At 8:49 hours and 27 seconds, the aircraft exploded. Kill time, 23 seconds. At 8:49 hours and 51 seconds, the fourth Me-262 achieved liftoff. The pilot, Lieutenant Heinz Baer, no relation to Heinrich Baer, retracted gear and began climbing. At 8:50 hours and 2 seconds, 3 P-51s engaged. Baer attempted to accelerate away, but his engines had not reached optimal thrust. At 8:50 hours and 19 seconds, rounds struck his port wing. At 8:50 hours and 24 seconds, the wing separated. The aircraft entered an uncontrollable spin. At 8:50 hours and 31 seconds, it impacted the ground. Kill time, 40 seconds. At 8:51 hours and 14 seconds, the fifth Me-262 attempted takeoff. At 8:51 hours and 26 seconds, a P-51 engaged. At 8:51 hours and 33 seconds, the Me-262 was destroyed. Kill time, 19 seconds. At 8:52 hours and 8 seconds, the sixth Me-262 began takeoff roll. The pilot, Oberfeldwebel Heinz Sachsenberg, was an experienced pilot with 37 victories. He applied full throttle and accelerated rapidly. At 8:52 hours and 21 seconds, a P-51 engaged from his 7 o'clock position. Sachsenberg continued his takeoff roll, attempting to achieve flying speed before the Mustang reached firing range. At 8:52 hours and 27 seconds, he lifted off. At 8:52 hours and 31 seconds, he retracted landing gear. At 8:52 hours and 36 seconds, rounds struck his starboard engine. At 8:52 hours and 41 seconds, the engine exploded. Sachsenberg attempted single-engine flight but lost control at low altitude. At 8:52 hours and 49 seconds, his aircraft crashed 1.8 kilometers from the airfield. Kill time, 41 seconds. At 8:53 hours and 18 seconds, the seventh Me-262 attempted takeoff. At 8:53 hours and 31 seconds, 2 P-51s engaged. At 8:53 hours and 38 seconds, the Me-262 exploded. Kill time, 20 seconds. The eighth Me-262 remained in its revetment, its pilot deciding that attempting takeoff constituted suicide. At 8:53 hours and 52 seconds, a P-51 strafed the revetment. At 8:53 hours and 58 seconds, rounds struck the parked aircraft. At 8:54 hours and 4 seconds, fuel tanks exploded. The pilot evacuated safely, but his aircraft was destroyed. Kill time, 12 seconds. Enemy aircraft destroyed, 8 Me-262s. Enemy pilots killed, 6. Enemy pilots wounded, 0. Enemy pilots uninjured but aircraft destroyed, 2. American losses: 1 P-51 damaged by anti-aircraft fire, pilot uninjured, aircraft returned to base. Kill ratio: 8-0 destroyed, 8-1 considering damaged aircraft. The ammunition expended exceeded Brandenburg-Brest's monthly allocation by 290%. The 14 P-51s collectively fired approximately 24,600 rounds during the engagement. Brandenburg-Brest's monthly ammunition allocation totaled 8,500 rounds. American expenditure in less than 7 minutes exceeded German monthly allocation by 16,100 rounds. The fuel consumed by 14 P-51s during the engagement totaled approximately 840 gallons. Brandenburg-Brest's weekly fuel allocation for all operations totaled 620 gallons. American fuel expenditure exceeded German weekly allocation by 220 gallons, or 35.5%. Lieutenant Otto Weissenberger witnessed the engagement from a nearby observation post. He had been ordered to document American tactics for intelligence purposes. He watched through binoculars as each Me-262 attempted takeoff and was destroyed. He recorded the precise timing of each engagement. He noted the coordination between P-51 flights. He observed their tactics: multiple aircraft engaging single targets, attacks from different angles simultaneously, continuous coverage preventing any escape opportunity. He wrote in his report, "This wasn't combat. This was systematic annihilation. The Americans have developed and refined procedures that eliminate our technological advantages through tactical precision. They identify vulnerability periods. They concentrate force against those periods. They execute with mechanical efficiency. Recommendation: if we cannot protect our jets during takeoff, we should not attempt daylight operations at all." May 1945, Interrogation Facility, Bavaria. Hauptmann Franz Stigler sat across a table from 2 American intelligence officers. The war had ended 3 days earlier. He answered questions with technical precision, glad the killing had finished. "We were not defeated by better soldiers, but by better factories," he began. "Your production capacity exceeded ours by factors we could not counter. A single American aircraft factory, Willow Run, produced 6,792 heavy bombers during the war. Germany's entire heavy bomber production from 1939 to 1945 totaled 6,086 aircraft. One of your factories outproduced our entire industry. This single comparison explains the war's outcome more clearly than any tactical analysis." The interrogators asked about Me-262 effectiveness. Stigler responded with characteristic precision. "The Me-262 was technologically superior to any Allied fighter. In air-to-air combat, kill ratios favored us by margins of 3-1 or higher, but tactical adaptation neutralized technology. Your pilots learned to attack during vulnerable phases. You concentrated force at points of maximum vulnerability. You exploited the 8-second engine spool time, the slow acceleration during takeoff roll, the inability to maneuver at low altitude and slow speed. By April 1945, we lost more jets during takeoff than in combat. The mathematics became inescapable. We could not survive reaching combat conditions." Unteroffizier Werner Zell, captured when his airfield was overrun by American ground forces, provided testimony that was both technical and emotional. "I saw it happen repeatedly. My fellow pilots died attempting to take off. They died taxiing to runways. They died sitting in cockpits waiting for engine start. The jets gave us speed and firepower, but they required vulnerable moments before those advantages became effective. Your pilots learned to exploit those moments with precision I had not seen earlier in the war. The attacks showed planning, coordination, and resources we could not match. They didn't just outproduce us. They revolutionized production itself. You built an industrial system that produced military power as a byproduct of normal capacity." Additional captured pilots provided testimony during systematic interrogations. Lieutenant Heinz Schmidt: "We brought precision-engineered superiority to a war of mass production. It was like bringing swords to artillery combat. Your fighters were good enough, and you had enough of them that good enough achieved decisive results." Oberfeldwebel Karl Grasser: "Their excess capacity exceeded our maximum effort. We maximized every resource. We extracted maximum output from minimum input. You operated from abundance we couldn't imagine. Your waste exceeded our allocation. Your training ammunition exceeded our combat ammunition. Your discarded materials exceeded our carefully hoarded supplies." Major Gunther Lutzow, who survived the war despite multiple combat wounds. They could lose 16 aircraft and replace them the next day. We could not replace one aircraft in a week. That mathematical disparity determined everything. Tactics, strategy, technology, all became secondary to industrial capacity. We fought with equipment we could not replace against enemies who replaced losses faster than we could inflict them. The mathematics were brutal. Their production rate exceeded our loss rate regardless of our effectiveness. Prisoners repeatedly mentioned waste. Oberleutnant Franz Haler, "Intelligence reports described your waste. We did not believe them. American factories discarded more material than we received in allocation. Workers threw away items we carefully conserved. The cafeterias discarded more food than our bases received. We thought this was propaganda. Then we saw it firsthand after capture. You really do operate from such abundance that waste becomes normal." That abundance decided the war before fighting began. Statistical testimony proved most devastating. Hauptmann-Stigler provided comprehensive numbers. American aircraft production 1944, 96,318. German aircraft production 1944, 39,807. American pilot training 1944, 85,000 pilots fully trained. German pilot training 1944, 14,000 pilots with abbreviated training due to fuel shortages. American aluminum production 1944, 920,000 tons. German aluminum production 1944, 245,000 tons. Single American factory monthly production, 614 P-51 Mustangs. Entire German monthly production, 284 Me-262s. Any single comparison shows decisive advantage. The accumulated comparisons show insurmountable advantage. We could not match your production through efficiency, effort, or innovation. Pilot testimony included production rates stated by enemy personnel. Lieutenant Otto Weissenberger, "American production allowed continuous replacement. You lost aircraft but never lost strength. Your groups maintained operational strength regardless of losses. Our groups decreased in strength continuously. We lost pilots we could not replace. We lost aircraft we could not replace." By April 1945, some jet units operated with 3 or 4 aircraft from authorized strength of 12. You maintained full strength continuously. That mathematical reality determined outcomes. The testimony concluded with stark admissions. Oberst Johann Steinhoff, who survived severe burns in an April crash. "We lost this war in American factories, not German airspace. Your industrial capacity exceeded ours by factors that made tactical efficiency irrelevant. You could be less efficient and still overwhelm us through sheer production volume. A single American factory produced more than our entire industry." That sentence explains Germany's defeat more completely than volumes of tactical analysis. The Me-262 proved that technological superiority without industrial capacity to support it becomes tactical curiosity rather than strategic advantage. Free workers outproduced slaves. Democratic cooperation exceeded totalitarian command. Industrial abundance buried ideological superiority under millions of tons of aircraft, ammunition, vehicles, ships, and equipment that Germany could not match through any combination of efficiency and effort. American production capacity represented not just quantitative advantage, but qualitative difference in how societies organized themselves. Totalitarian systems mobilized resources through coercion. Democratic systems mobilized resources through organization. Coercion proved less effective than organization when measured in production output. March 18, 1945. Oberstleutnant Heinrich Baer had laughed at American attempts to catch jets during takeoff. April 19, 1945. He died during takeoff when 3 P-51s engaged his aircraft with coordinated fire. Their mockery became history's most expensive miscalculation. The mathematics that seemed undeniable on March 18 became catastrophically wrong by April 19. Technology without industrial support proved inadequate. Efficiency without resources proved insufficient. Training without replacement capacity proved temporary. Germany possessed superior technology in specific systems. America possessed superior capacity in all systems. Capacity defeated technology through overwhelming material advantage that no tactical innovation could counter. The lesson remains: dismissing democratic nations as weak because they prefer peace or underestimating free people's productive capacity invites catastrophic miscalculation. The Me-262 was the world's first operational jet fighter. It achieved impressive kill ratios in air combat. It represented engineering excellence, but it lost to P-51 Mustangs not through inferior technology, but through insufficient production. America built 15,000 P-51s. Germany built 1,400 Me-262s. The ratio determined outcomes more decisively than any technical comparison. Industrial capacity, organized through free societies and supported by willing workers, produced military power that totalitarian efficiency could not match. That lesson, written in the destruction of 237 Me-262s and the deaths of 189 German pilots, remains relevant. Never underestimate the productive capacity of free peoples defending principles they voluntarily chose to defend.